Welcome to Wrestling with Heart, a podcast looking at pro wrestlers giving back to their community. Join me, Stanley Carr, as I interview wrestling's hottest names who use their platforms as entertainers to raise awareness and do community service. Hello and welcome to another edition of Wrestling with Heart. This is the show where we talk with professional wrestlers and professional wrestling personalities about their lives in and outside of the ring, as well as doing acts of charity work, community service, volunteering, and spreading positivity. We're all about the positivity here on the show, and with me right now, I've got a very special guest. He is a multiple-time champion everywhere he's been, worked for the NWA and Jim Crockett Promotions, as well as WCW. Pleased to welcome the one and only Nikita Koloff. Welcome, Nikita, to Wrestling with Heart.
Stanley, it's great to be with you, and I'm in the right place and with the right guy. If it's all about being positive, because anyone who follows me on social media probably probably concludes pretty quick that I try to be a very positive guy. So great to be with you.
Yes, the pleasure's all mine. So you're from Minneapolis, Minnesota, big sports town. Tell me about your childhood and upbringing.
Yeah, it's a long way from Russia, Stanley, but hey, it made for a great story. So born and raised in Minneapolis, spent several years there in the projects, what they affectionately called the Minneapolis Housing Authority, product of welfare. My dad left when I was about 3 years old. I was the youngest of four. My mom raised four of us by herself. She'd eventually move us out to a suburb called Robbinsdale, which has since become legendary for putting out quite a number of recognizable names in wrestling, of which I can share with you. We'll kind of tease the viewers there, and we can get into those names in a little while.
Mm-hmm.
But and got passionate about the age of 12 with weightlifting, bodybuilding, football, and that became a driving force for me really for the next about the next 10, 12 years.
So you were an athlete pretty much from the age of 12, like really into like fitness and all that stuff.
Yeah. I picked up this magazine. I guess it's kind of divine, called Iron Man.
Mm-hmm.
It was a bodybuilding magazine. And man, I was just enamored by the guys in the magazine, Stanley. And I can remember at age 12 making a statement and saying, one day I'm going to look like one of those guys. And I went out and bought a 110-pound plastic weight set from Sears and Roebuck, as it was called back in the day. Your younger viewers will have to Google that. But started working out, and then a guy named Jerry McFarland came into my life. Jerry was a health teacher at the junior high school, but he was also a professional bodybuilder. So I naturally gravitated towards him. And I spent as much time around him, 9th grade, 10th grade, 11th grade, 12th grade, learned everything I could from him.
What were some of the things that you took away from that?
Well, the importance of that it's not just about lifting weights or jumping on a treadmill, that eating is probably 80% of the equation when it comes to being healthy. And exercise is maybe 20% of it, and then the value of supplementation. So even if you're eating right, it's important to supplement, your schedule with, with the vitamins and minerals. And God made our bodies, it says in the Bible, made Adam from the dust of the earth. Well, what's in the earth? Minerals. So our bodies need vitamins and minerals, and all those probiotics and all those sorts of things.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just embraced that and incorporated that into my lifestyle. So between the combination of supplementation, exercise, eating well, I've tried to keep myself in decent shape all these years.
Yeah, definitely. That's a part of the whole fitness regimen is making sure you're eating right, you're staying healthy, drinking a lot of water, doing what you need to do. And like we've been talking about so far, coming up from this athletic background, you also tried out for football too. What was that experience like?
So yeah, I was training. So again, going back to age 12, when I made that statement, one day I'm going to look like one of those guys. I kind of fell in love with pro football, the NFL, and I thought and I just got a vision. I said, one day, man, one day I want to play in the NFL. And so, that again, that became my driving force. So all through high school, college, that was my vision, that was my passion, that's what I was shooting for. I was scouted by the NFL my senior year in college. I played at a smaller college up in northern Minnesota called Moorhead State University, and my quarterback went and played 4 years for behind Phil Simms with the New York Giants, and so that's how I was recognized. And then I had a severe leg fracture my senior year. It kind of set me back, but it didn't hold me back. Okay, for all your viewers out here, here's something positive for you. A setback doesn't have to hold you back. It can be a setup for a comeback. And so I used that fractured leg as a setup for a comeback, training for that pro football drought when I got a phone call from a guy named Road Warrior Animal about becoming a professional wrestler. And I'll just turn it over to you from there.
Yeah, okay. So was professional wrestling something you were into as a kid before you got that call?
It's a great question. And so that's the irony. Yeah, I was familiar with it for a couple reasons. Vern Gagne and the AWA was headquartered in Minneapolis. And so it was on local TV every weekend. I wasn't an avid viewer per se. You might flip through the channels and see a match or two, and I'm like, yeah. Because I wasn't a fan. I wasn't a fan or interested in amateur wrestling either. Although the high school coach Pete Grigelko tried to talk me into going out for it, but I just had no interest in it. And the other reason I was familiar with it was at one point in college, in Minneapolis. I was working out at a gym called Ventura's Gym. Does that name
Yep, Jesse.
Jesse the Body Ventura, right? So,
Hmm.
working out his gym, about 25 of us muscle heads, got to know him. My one and only live wrestling event was in St. Paul, Minnesota, and he was actually doing a deadlift competition against who would later become the manager of the Road Warriors, Paul Ellering.
Hmm.
And there were about 18,000 people in that arena that night, Stanley. There was about 17,975 fans of Paul and 25 fans of Jesse.
Wow.
Us. And we were not well received. That was my first taste of a live pro wrestling event. So no, I wasn't, I didn't grow up dreaming of being a pro wrestler.
Yeah, I mean, you're making that transition, we're talking about bodybuilding and fitness to football to wrestling, different kinds of crowds, was it hard transitioning from football to wrestling?
So I guess because of my athletic abilities, my skills, Ivan Koloff, who, Uncle Ivan Koloff, who him and his partner Don Kernodle became my mentors, my trainers, if you will. I essentially had on the job training. Anyone who, if you're not familiar with my story, again, I had no amateur wrestling background, but I didn't have any professional training either. My sights were set on pro football. So when I got that phone call from Road Warrior Animal, and I made an ensuing phone call to Jim Crockett in Charlotte, North Carolina, had a 5-minute conversation with him, made sure he understood I had no experience. He said that wasn't required. I said, okay. So he said, be in my office on such and such a day with your head shaved bald. I go, that's it. And he goes, that's it. I said, okay. Showed up the day he said to be there, walked in, met Don Kernodle, Ivan Koloff, and they stuck me right on the interview set after giving me some options for names. Nikita Koloff is born in the hallways of Charlotte in 1984. We wrap up the interviews in Stanley. They're like, be in Raleigh, North Carolina tomorrow night. You're going to wrestle on television. Well, no pressure there, right?
Hmm.
They showed me some basic things in the dressing room 11 seconds later, had my first win in professional wrestling. For the next couple 3 months, Ivan, Don, and I would get to the towns early. They would bump and thump all over the ring, teaching me the mechanics of wrestling. And then I'd sit in their corner, watch their world tag team match every night. And then on the drive home every night, we talk about that old school psychology of wrestling. And that's how I learned. Trial by
Yeah.
fire.
Yeah, I mean, that knowledge is very important. You want to learn, as much as you can, from the veterans, the people that have been there for a long time. And so, what were some of the things that you learned from them that stuck with you throughout your career?
Well, again, if I go back to the psychology now, it's a different product now than it was then. I mean, it's still obviously very popular, but it's a completely different product. Back in that era, that many of the fans, when I'm out doing autograph signings, I was just recently in Sevierville, doing a 2-day autograph signing up there at Rise Up Con, and what I hear from the fans most of the time is that was the golden era of wrestling, and there was a real psychology, or Stanley, a real art to the business in this regard. We might have been we were typically given an outcome, and then we had to, for the next, depending on how long the match was. I mean, if I'm wrestling Ric Flair for 60 minutes, 55 of those minutes are spontaneous. Like, we might not even talk or meet until we get in the ring, because the venues back in those days, a lot of times we were at opposite ends of the building, separate dressing rooms, never even talked to each other or saw each other until we got in the ring. And then through verbal and nonverbal cues, spontaneously we would tell a story, so you, the fan, would be drawn into the story, and it would lead into that outcome that a promoter, or what they call the booker, would determine what that outcome was. And so to be schooled by Ivan Koloff, one of the legends of pro wrestling, and Don Kernodle, he didn't have maybe necessarily as big a name over the course of his career, but he was still very schooled in the art of wrestling, and he had an amateur background. So that was beneficial as well.
Yeah, I mean, when you're in there, you really have to learn all kinds of techniques in order to really become good at your craft. So for you, I'd imagine like training was just brutal.
Well, so the of course, obviously, I maintain my daily regimen of 2 hours, 3 hours in the gym, and then sitting in the corner every night and watching their match, and then driving home able to say, why did you do that series of moves, or those moves at that time? And for them to be able to explain that, and then maybe go out the next night and try to perfect that or implement into them my own match, is what I would try to do, Stanley. And little by little, I was able to implement a lot of those things into the matches, and perfect them to a degree. And so, again, I can't give enough credit to Ivan and Don, and later on a few others: Dusty Rhodes, Ric Flair, Ricky Steamboat, at Rock and Roll Express, Ricky and Robert, and others, Dory Funk Jr., guys that was masters of their craft, that I had the privilege of wrestling early in my career, that helped lead to the success of my career.
Yeah, I mean, you've had so many incredible rivalries. Who are some of the favorite opponents you got to be in the ring with over the years?
So I'll share, like, what I hear from the fans, because that's
Mhm.
actually, I think, more fun than my, although I'll give my view as well. But the number one most talked about is the best of 7 series against a guy named Magnum TA. And Magnum had a tragic career-ending automobile accident in 1986. Prior to that, we had the historic 7 series US title matches. and leading into that final match in Charlotte, North Carolina, when that dirty Russian, took the U.S. title and put it around his waist, right, and to get the ire of the fans. So certainly Magnum TA. If I wrestled Ric Flair once, I wrestled Rick 200 times. I mean, I don't even know how many. I mean, I had never even thought to count how many times I was working with him. Um, I mean, again, you go down the line, the Road Warriors. A lot of people say, those matches were legendary or they were brutal matches. The chain matches, Stanley, the Russian chain matches. A lot of people talk about my chain match against Sting. And I think it may be one of the Clash of Champions, or I don't know if it was a Great American Bash, the Starcade, the unification of the World TV title against Terry Taylor. A lot of people bring that match up. And so, I look, man, Steve Austin, Ravishing Rick Rude, Mark Callis for, I'll test your audience there. Mean Mark Callis. Well, that was perhaps his original name. He went on to be legendary in the WWE. We'll tease some people to figure out who I'm talking about there if they don't know. But those are just some of the guys.
Yeah, I mean, you've wrestled just a who's who, and I mean, such an iconic character. I mean, it was the '80s, like the era of the heels when it comes to the bad guys, the foreign heels. That was like that decade for that, man. I mean, I bet you really could not stand the booze over time. Did it ever get to you, and how did you deal with that?
Really, Stanley, just the opposite. The more they booed, the more thrilled I became because if you're a bad guy and they're not booing you or throwing stuff at you, your career could be short lived.
Yeah.
You want them booing, you want them mad, you want right, and so I took that as a real compliment that they did, and in fact, it was the Cold War era, and there were times when Jim Crockett, his office, would get death threats. The Koloffs show up in such and such a town tonight. They won't be returning home. Back in those days, there were some serious fans. I mean, 6 different times, Stanley, I had fans come over the barricade, attempt to get in the ring and attack me. Six
Oh,
different
goodness
times.
gracious. Yeah. Uh, I'm so sorry.
What? No, hey, again, I think it's a compliment, part of the job.
Yeah, but you made it through, and you're still regarded as one of the legends. I mean, getting inducted into 2 Hall of Fames. I mean, that's got to feel good.
It is. It's thrilling. In fact, I'll be up in Iowa. They're celebrating Dan Gable's historical museum. Hey, if you're an avid wrestling fan or not even an avid fan, I want to encourage you, whether you make your way to Waterloo, Iowa in July for their 25th anniversary. These guys put on a stellar weekend. I mean, from matches to banquet. I'm going to be up there. I'm not even sure what all legends are going to be there. But to have been inducted into that Hall of Fame, to me was one of the most significant honors that I could receive. Of course, the NWA Hall of Fame, when the Omni was still in operation, I was inducted into that Hall of Fame. Big part of the NWA, loyal to the NWA. But Dan Gable's museum and Wrestling Hall of Fame in Waterloo, Iowa. Go research it in July, towards the end of July. They've got a 25-year anniversary. It's going to be an incredible weekend. Yeah, quite an honor. And recently in the Minnesota Hall of Fame, about a year ago or so, I was inducted into the Minnesota Professional Hall of Fame.
Congratulations.
Yeah,
That's
thank
so
you.
awesome. You're welcome. Well, let's switch gears now. You've done a lot of work outside of wrestling as far as charity goes, and you also run your own ministry organization. Tell me about some of the things that you've done outside of wrestling to help out in your community.
Yeah, it's been been a whirlwind of a journey. It really has, because to use some old expressions and cliche, never in a million years would I have envisioned. One, let's just talk about the wrestling career we just talked about,
Hmm.
and then secondly, what I've been doing really for about the last 30 years, and about 11 months, Stanley, about 11 months after I left wrestling, I found myself in a church at an altar on my knees, surrendering my life to Jesus Christ and encountering Him in a personal way, establishing a relationship with Him. And that encounter on that morning, 17 October 1993, has set me on a course or a path that I just never would have dreamed of. I mean, if I kind of summarize what I've done the last 30 years since that decision that day, so I've written three books. Um, the first one I'm going to get back into print, Breaking the Chains. The other two, Wrestling with Success and A Tale of the Ring of Redemption, are available on my website, koloff.net. They're available there and I autograph anything that's ordered through my website. And last year I went in the studio and I did an audiobook version in my own voice of my life story. And I wanted people to be able to hear my story in my own voice. And so that was an amazing project as well. I've traveled now to date to 36 different countries, Stanley. I've been to all 50 states. I've ministered to an audience of one, and to date, the largest audience was over 73,000 in Jamaica at an outdoor crusade. I had Lex Luger with me, and I'll kind of wrap up some of this story for another question. Of course, you see the shirt I'm wearing, you see behind me, Man Camp. That's a camp that Lex Luger and I facilitate every spring in April, every fall in October. We bring 20 to 25 men from 18 years. The oldest has been 76. We've had a guy with one leg of 10, a guy with one arm, a guy with one eye. I mean, it's open to all guys. And we bring them in for a handful of days, Stanley. And the objective is to equip these guys, send them home empowered to just be godly men, godly husbands, godly fathers, godly grandfathers, and really just impact their own families and impact their communities, the marketplace where they work, and wherever the highways and byways may take them. And then let me also just say this as well. Never would I thought I would have a podcast and a radio show either, and launched that back in September of 2020, and that's been heard now in 93 different countries. The Man
Mm.
Up Show, and so lots of stuff I'm doing. Autograph signing still, as you heard earlier. It's just been an amazing journey. Amazing.
Yeah, and definitely someone that's made a difference in their community. You definitely helped shape the lifestyles of people that may have been going through a rough time in their life. So that's amazing to see that you along with Lex have developed such a unique organization.
It is. I mean, Koloff for Christ Ministries, from the time its inception and launch till now, has had the privilege of, as you said, of impacting really thousands and thousands. No, I don't know how many. Honestly, I don't know how many. Sting and I did an outreach in Indianapolis, Indiana, back in, I think, about 2002, in front of 43,000 teenagers up in Indianapolis, and we saw over 10,000 of them respond to the altar invitation that night. And so no tell, even in my own local community. So I came to Charlotte, North Carolina in 1984. I've been to the Carolinas longer than anywhere else, Stanley. So I guess I'm technically a native Carolinian now. Not a Minnesotan, although I still got those roots, Minnesota. Um, and by the way, I got four children, and just got blessed with grandchild number 12. My youngest daughter
Mm.
Colby and her husband Andrew just adopted a brand new little baby boy, Elliot Gabriel, just a couple weeks ago. So grandchild number 12. And So yeah, I'm a blessed man, Stanley.
Yeah. Again, congratulations. You've definitely just have done so much to help so many people, and now you've got, family members who you're passing that wisdom down to. What is it about giving back to your community that gives you the most joy?
It's a great question, and I've had to learn over the years. It wasn't. Let me give your viewers a little bit more backstory. As I mentioned, coming out of the projects of Minneapolis and being a product of welfare, um, I had to work my way out of a poverty mindset. Now, if some have never heard that expression, it's one where you try to hold on to everything because you didn't have a whole lot. As a kid growing up, I didn't have a whole lot. So through my success as an adult, I've tried to, I would try to kind of have a white knuckle grip on things. And as I develop my relationship with Jesus, I've come to learn a couple things. I like to think I have. One, he loves a cheerful giver. And two, he loves a generous giver. It says to be generous on every occasion. The Bible says, be generous on every occasion. And so I'm a big believer in not only the sharing of my time, which I'll do that a lot. Like I've got some young guys in my life right now, a 19-year-old named CJ, a 16-year-old named John, and some guys that are slightly older, but I'm pouring into them, spending time with them, helping to hopefully pass on some of the things, the wisdom that I've learned. And then on the other end of things, giving of my not only of my time, but giving of my finances, giving back to my home church, the Refuge, up in Kannapolis, North Carolina, Jay Stewart, and then above and beyond my tithe are offerings, Stanley. As the Bible talks about the giving of tithes and offerings. Currently, there's 7 different ministries, several of which are international, that I invest in on a monthly basis and give to. And I'll just tell you, you can't outgive God. It doesn't matter, no matter whether you're giving of your time, your money, your talent, treasure, whatever it is, you can't outgive God. He's going to give back to you so that you can give more. And so those are just a couple of the principles that I've been learning along the way of this life journey.
Yeah. You definitely have to start. We all have to start somewhere. You just got to keep doing it and doing it.
You got to start somewhere. That's exactly right. And Colossians 1:10 is kind of become a life scripture for me. Colossians 1:10. And here's what it says. It says, to like I don't repeat it every day but I try to be conscious of it, that I'm going to go out today and hopefully I'll live a life today that honors the Lord. I live a life that's worthy of him. If I'm going to call myself a Christ follower, I'm going to live a life that's worthy of him. I'm going to do my best to please him in every way, in my thoughts, my words, and my actions. I hope to grow in the knowledge of him day by day, and then bear good fruit, positive, right? Your show's about
Mm-hmm.
being positive.
Positive.
So I hope to bear good fruit to anyone I come in contact with, a positive, encouraging word, or a random act of kindness, or something of that nature.
Yeah. And now, when we talked about it a few minutes ago, but when you go to these conventions and see the fans, I mean, it's got to make you feel good inside for them to recall these memories that they grew up watching you.
That's the funnest part for me now. I tell people all the time, like, for real. And hey, you're out there with me. You're coming out there to meet me. Man, tell me your stories, right? Tell me your stories. I love hearing how, whether, you were, things like you were my inspiration to get into weightlifting, or you were my inspiration to get into football, or you helped me in my childhood through a very, very difficult time when I could watch your show on the weekend and it would kind of take my mind away from all the troubles in my family or at school or what else. Which, by the way, I'll just say too, if I've got the Man Up podcast, but I also got a show, Stanley, called Q&A with Koloff. And what that show is, it's an opportunity for me to call you, and you get to ask me some questions on the
Hmm,
show.
that's
So it's
very
not me,
nice.
like you're asking me, all the questions
Hmm.
today.
Hmm.
It'd be we reverse it. I mean, I'm usually asking all the questions on my show, but I call you, you ask me questions. So anyone who would have an interest in getting a personal phone call from the Russian Nightmare and be on Q&A with Koloff, you just got to send me a message, man, through koloff.net. Just go to my website, which is where you can connect with me on social media. You can download the podcast. You can find out more about the man camp, all of it on koloff.net. So, yeah, maybe maybe Shannon, maybe I'll get you on Q&A with Koloff.
I'd love to. I'd love to
Okay.
be on there for sure.
Yeah, love to
Thanks.
have you on there and just ask some of your questions, and we'll promote your podcast and
Yes.
get the word out there for you.
Awesome. I please do. Would love that very much. Hey, listen, Nikita, I just want to say thank you again for coming on to Wrestling with Heart. It means a lot to me and to my listeners, and you're more than welcome to come back.
I appreciate the invitation. I really do, and I love the title, Wrestling with Heart. And hey, know this for all the viewers out there. I'll kind of maybe I kind of end on this note. I think about that wrestling with heart, right? And of course, what's transformed my own life was a heart change. That heart change occurred 17 October 1993 when I gave my life to Christ. The Bible says, when we make that decision, he'll take a heart of stone out of us and he'll put a heart of flesh in us, and
Hmm.
he'll put his spirit, the Holy Spirit, in us. And so all the things I've talked about tonight, or many of the things, or what I've been able to accomplish, I now recognize and give credit where credit is due. And that's to my creator who gave me this opportunity and the gifts and talents to be able to, whether it's have this interview with you tonight, or do a plethora of things that I'm doing. And so I'm grateful. I'm thankful. I just want to encourage all your viewers out there. Look for ways that you can express your own heart, and how you can make a difference and an impact on the lives around you. Start with your own family, and then outside of your family, out in the workplace or wherever the highways and byways take you. Look for ways. Be intentional to look for ways how you can impact in a positive way, right, Stanley?
That's
In
right.
in a positive way, somebody else's life.
I love to hear that. Thanks again, Nikita.
Hey, thank you. God bless you. And hey, go with God. Thanks, Stanley.
Take care.
This is Wrestling with Heart. I hope you found this podcast to be informative and entertaining. If you did, please hit the subscribe button and look out for the next edition.